This Sunday on Capital Connection, the Democratic defection. 6 women in the Democratic Party call for Speaker Madigan to step down now. Plus, the push to protect our veterans from the coronavirus. President Trump's Secretary of the VA joins us for a wide-ranging discussion. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, August 2nd. Pressure is mounting on House Speaker Michael Madigan to resign in the face of ComEd's corruption investigation. The top executive from that company apologizing to the public at a hearing before the Illinois Commerce Commission earlier this week. One day later, House Republican leader Jim Durkin dropping his condition that Madigan resign only if those allegations were proven true. Now upping the call, saying Madigan should resign immediately. And more importantly, 6 Illinois Democrats, 3 in the House and 3 in the Senate, are calling for Madigan to resign effective immediately. But Governor Pritzker wouldn't go that far.
But there's also more that we need to learn, and the U.S. Attorney clearly is on a path here. We're going to learn more. There is no doubt about it. And from that information, it will inform us how to write the laws to prevent that from happening in the future.
If the Speaker called you today, would you say stay or go?
Well, I've been very clear about my position about this. I mean, I think the Speaker has an enormous amount to answer for. There are questions that the public needs to hear the answer to. I do too. And so that's what I would start with, questions, about exactly what happened here and what these allegations that are being made that are somewhat vague, frankly. I mean, there's more information you would need. But in that, deferred prosecution agreement, the DPA for ComEd, there is obviously reference to the Speaker and to people around the Speaker. I want to know those connections. I want to understand what it is the Speaker was doing. He needs to answer these questions. I think many of us have called for that.
Joining us now is House Democrat Stephanie Kifowit from her home office in Oswego, Illinois. Thank you for joining us. A retired Marine, also one of the 6 Democratic women who are right now calling for Speaker Madigan to resign without placing any condition on that call. Representative, some of your colleagues are saying Speaker Madigan should resign if these allegations are proven true. You're not offering that condition. Why not?
Well, I view it, I did send a statement like that similar earlier on, and he should be resigned. In my view, my statement related to his role as a House representative. My letter today in reflection is on his role as Speaker of the House, which is a very predominant leadership position, one that requires public trust and integrity, which I think in the ComEd deferred prosecution agreement shows that that's been undermined by the actions and allegations that are in that document. And so I'm calling him to immediately step down as Speaker. If the allegations are true, I expect him to resign as state representative.
That could take years to play out if the allegations are proven to be true, especially if he mounts a vigorous legal defense. To play that argument out, I expect some of the Speaker's lawyers could say, he didn't know this was going on, and that these folks like Mike McLean or other members of his inner circle that were landing on ComEd's payroll, that all of this might have just happened without him knowing about it. Would you, for a moment, believe that that could possibly be true?
Well, I think if that's the argument they're going to make, then that shows really a dereliction of duty. Because if you're Speaker of the House, you should know if individuals are using your name or are promoting favoritism to quote, keep you happy, public official A to keep happy. That's a dereliction of duty that leads to undermining the trust and the integrity of the office of Speaker of the House. So just like you said, it could take years of guilt to be proven, but I think leadership in the House is very important, and we cannot have a Speaker of the House under FBI scrutiny or even listed in FBI documents. It's just simply wrong.
And you raised the issue of a conflict of interest because as the House of Representatives and the Illinois Senate consider this ethics discussion moving forward, I think you articulated in your letter to the Speaker that itself raises a conflict for him, because he would be in charge of, or would hold significant sway over, the process and debate in writing new ethics rules that he himself might be bound by.
That's 100% correct. And I believe that we, as representatives in the House of Illinois House, need to look at the whole situation, not just with ComEd, but the whole process in which these decisions get made, and where could be a check and balance put into place. Right now, all the employees in the Illinois House research staff, issue staff, fall under the sole discretion of the Speaker. In fact, even our legislative assistants fall under that, and we've been cut out of any process with them. So everybody falls under the onus and under the umbrella of the Speaker of the House, which is why it is so important that we have a person in there of integrity that has the public trust, and like you said, does not have a conflict of interest when we are looking at trying to get substantial ethics reform. And this, we need to look at specifically ComEd and how this legislation came about, and he was one of the chief organizers for it.
Yeah, it's noteworthy that the deferred prosecution agreement came out 13 days before you wrote your letter. That strikes me because you did not immediately pounce on this. It seems you stopped and considered and read and thought this through. You mulled it over. Was that a difficult decision? Was it hard for you to press send on that letter?
It really is. It is. And as I opened my letter, I've been a state representative 8 years. And I would say for the first 4 years, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You have to figure everything out. And I truly hold people in my heart to do the right thing. And I immediately sent out a statement that said if they're true, he should resign, because to set that bar. And then, like you said, I read, I researched, I self-reflected, and this is just not the person, a leader that I can support. And it's certainly not an individual that I think right now, with the public trust being broken, with the integrity of the office of Speaker being in question and the conflict of interest, I don't think he should be the Speaker of the House and should immediately step down.
All right, Representative Kifowit, thank you for joining us. We're going to have to leave it there. When we come back, another member of our military, Colonel in the Air Force Reserve, Secretary Robert Wilkie, who heads up President Trump's Department of Veterans Affairs, joins us next. Stick around.
This order could be more than an order. This order could be the first one you've actually had time for in longer than you can remember. Or this order could be a reason to leave the house today. Whatever this order is for you, we'll be here to take it.
Take a break and enjoy a fresh beef quarter pounder with cheese and pair it with a $1 any size soft drink. Available every day, all day, only at McDonald's.
My part-time service in the Army National Guard makes it possible for me to be more for the community I call home. I'm a better neighbor because my service has taught me how important it is to be a team player. My training helps me in my classes when I must give attention to detail to the task at hand. My service in the Army National Guard allows me to keep my community and those I care about safe from threats. Learn more about how you too can live and serve part-time close to home by visiting nationalguard.com.
This summer, your donation is needed more than ever before. The need for blood is picking up at our local hospitals. Blood donors provide an essential life-saving gift. Give blood with Community Blood Services of Illinois, and you'll provide a critical life-saving resource for our community. Your donation can help make the world a better place. Find a donor center or nearby mobile blood drive at bloodcenter.org. That's bloodcenter.org.
I'm Garrett, project manager, and I've been with the Roofing Dog family since 2005.
I'm Corey. I'm one of the original members. I've been with the Roofing Dog since 2004.
I'm Ryan, and I've been with the Roofing Dog since 2010.
I'm Jarrett. I've been with the Roofing Dog since 2007.
I'm Chandler. I'm Jared's brother, and I chose to work with the Roofing Dog with family and a place with family values. And I've been with the Roofing Dog since 2011.
Respect for our clients and our employees adds up to amazing service. Thank you for choosing the Roofing Dog.
Lately, we've found new ways to support and care for each other. And while every gesture counts, so too does every dollar. That's why American Family Insurance is returning $425 million to our customers. This includes a 10% savings for all current and new auto customers for the rest of the year. We hope this does your world some good and reminds you that supporting your dreams means the world to us. Contact your agent or go to amfam.com to learn about more ways to save.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Nearly 40,000 American veterans have tested positive for COVID-19 since March, and more than 2,000 of them have died. Nearly 2,000 of those positive tests are here in Illinois, where 66 veterans have already died of the coronavirus. Joining us now is the head of the second largest agency in our federal government, Robert Wilkie, the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Secretary, you're the second man to hold this job during the Trump administration. It's an honor to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
According to data from the CDC, it would appear on its surface that VA patients who test positive for the coronavirus are more likely to die than the average American. But of course, many of those VA patients who are already at VA hospitals may be older, they may be sicker already to start with. But there's still cause for concern, I think, not just for the virus itself, but for its many other effects, namely isolation or mental health, those things that are facing new stresses or new challenges in this time of social distancing especially. So is it too early yet, or does the VA have any read on those secondary effects of COVID-19, isolation or mental health, and how hard they might be hitting our veterans?
Yeah, I think we do. But before I answer that, I will tell you that we serve 9.5 million veterans, and we have lost 2,000 veterans since this happened. Thankfully, the predictions that were made at the beginning of this, that we would be losing tens of thousands and would have hundreds of thousands infected, did not come true. And that's because I believe that we were the first healthcare system to take emergency measures. If you look at our nursing homes, we have 134, 7,500 patients there. As of today, we have 4 infections amongst those 7,500. So that is the best news story out there when it comes to the care for our most vulnerable. But we were able to stress the system in the ways that you suggested, particularly in mental health. In a normal month, we have 40,000 mental health tele-appointments. In the month of June, we had over 900,000. So we have actually expanded VA's footprint, particularly in rural and tribal America. And in so doing, we've shown a way forward for the future of mental health care. We're actually reaching more people now than we did before the epidemic. We also have a new partnership with Walmart, where we're setting up telehealth clinics in Walmarts across the country, which means that Walmart, which has a footprint in rural America, will be able to offer veterans access to us when they just show up, go to the pharmacy counter, and they're escorted into what looks like a living room, and they can talk to VA people across the country. We were concerned about the isolation, but I think with telehealth, and particularly the acceptance of this by my father's generation, the Vietnam era, we've made a great stride forward.
In the month of July, the VA started opening its doors of its hospitals to take more patients in. There was that time where I think many healthcare systems were trying to reserve space in case there was that surge. But I want to shift gears a little bit from the technology to the treatment. You told Martha Raddatz back in May that many VA hospitals were giving hydroxychloroquine to many patients, veterans who were sick with COVID-19, in some cases in their last hours of life. At the time, of course, the FDA had cleared hydroxychloroquine for emergency treatment in some cases at their doctor's discretion, but 1 month later, the FDA would reverse course and revoke that emergency ability for doctors to use hydroxychloroquine in those cases, saying, quote, "These medicines showed no benefit for decreasing the likelihood of death or speeding recovery." So my question is, are VA hospitals still administering, still giving hydroxychloroquine to veterans with COVID-19?
Well, we only work under FDA and CDC guidelines. We use hydroxychloroquine 42,000 times a day.
For patients with malaria or lupus?
With lupus and with arthritis. And since that time, there have been more studies that show that this has a prophylactic effect. But no, we only do this if the doctor it follows FDA or CDC guidelines. And even then, we did it only if the patient requested it.
So do I understand you then that the VA is no longer administering hydroxychloroquine?
We're not using it as an emergency tool.
For COVID-19, right, just for other ailments.
Right. So we offer hope, and we engaged in the use of the material of the drug as a means of giving someone hope at a very desperate stage in his life. Now, there have been studies not too far from you up in Michigan that contradict that study that you referenced from Great Britain, which was pulled back because it was a political study and not a medical study in the British medical journal Lancet. Again, we use it every day, but in terms of emergency use, we were down to, I think, by the time I did that interview with Martha Raddatz, I think we'd only used it twice in that week.
All right, he said he was the Undersecretary for the Department of Personnel. That was when he was reporting to Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, also a colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. When we come back, Secretary Wilkie updates us on one of President Trump's biggest campaign promises, how to cut down wait times for veterans trying to get in to see their doctor. We're back in a moment.
After fire, water, mold, or storm damage to a property, Central Illinois knows who to call to get their lives back in order. They call Menold. Now that businesses are reopening, Menold is still here to help us all get safely back to normal. With Menold sanitizing and disinfection service, customers and employees will know that you're doing everything you can to stay safe. Consider Menold sanitizing and disinfection service and see if it's the right choice for you.
Thousands of memories will be placed on that end table. So choose one that will hold those memories longer. When you buy right, it stays right. Year after year, into the next generation. Wright's Furniture and Flooring, making you right at home.
The sky is always blue at Arbor Rose. At our location, there's a dedicated activity center and indoor town square with a beautiful walking path. Arbor Rose Adult Daycare and Memory Care Home, a small home with a big heart.
Be as cool and relaxed as these dogs. Let your friends at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing install a new Lennox home comfort system for you. We offer special financing plus $1,000 off a complete Lennox system or a free water heater. Call us today and ask about all of the ways we can help take care of the indoor air quality in your home. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend.
During this pandemic, Campus Town Urgent Care is here to help and get you answers you need. Located on the corner of Wright and Green in Champaign, we offer both COVID-19 and antibody testing. The antibody testing will let you know if you previously had COVID-19. Our drive-through COVID-19 test is also available. Simply drive up. Our medical professionals will come to you, take a sample by nasal swab, and you're done. Results usually within 2 days. Head to our website, campustownurgentcare.com, to register for testing and learn more. For exceptional care, go to Campus Town Urgent Care.
Join the WCIA3 sports team. Brett Behrens, Marley Weirda, and Andy Olson from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Sports Desk for the best in local sports coverage in Central Illinois on WCIA3. You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Choice, VA choice, where rather than waiting online for weeks and weeks and dying, so you have people went in, they're moderately, they have a minor problem, they end up, it takes so long, they end up terminal. Now they go see a doctor, and we pay for the doctor.
Okay. Where's our secretary? He's got to make it work, so we have to give that.
Those wait times, a big part of President Trump's, then candidate Trump's promises to the veteran community when he sought your vote, asking you to elect him president of these United States. The American people did, and now we're going to get an update on those wait times from the Secretary of the VA. President Trump said veterans' choice would be a big thing, how I understand it, and we welcome back Robert Wilkie, the Secretary of the VA, here to give us an update on how that's going. I noticed when President Trump expanded this program and handed you a pen, and I think it was back in 2018, he sort of pointed at you and said, now this is the guy who has to get it done. So it's your job to help reduce wait time for veterans when they're trying to see their doctor. I understand if it goes past 3 or 4 weeks and they can't get in to see their VA doctor, whether it's a regular physician or a specialist, then there's this sort of spillover where they can go see a private doctor somewhere. But just last year, I want to ask you about a report from the Government Accountability Office that found that veterans in this program are still waiting some 51 to 64 days to get in and see one of those doctors, not meeting that 30-day guarantee in this program. That's a year old now. Where is that number today? Do you monitor that? And how well is that program succeeding?
Well, I first addressed it by saying that VA is now experiencing all-time record high in terms of its approval rating for health care. We're at 90%. The last administration was lucky to get to 52. I think that was their high point. And last year, we set a record for the number of appointments taken care of within VA at 59.9 million. The choice that the president talks about was our way of saying that if we don't have a service that a veteran needs in a timely manner, we will make sure that that veteran can access care in the private sector. And that was our response to the great expanse of the United States, meaning there are places in this country, in Texas and Montana in particular, in some parts of California and Arizona and Utah, where you're taking hundreds of miles in just a round trip to get to and from a VA facility at the same time you pass other medical facilities. We don't want to put that burden on a veteran if we can avoid it. But what we have seen, though, is that veterans are voting with their feet, and they are choosing in greater numbers to stay with us because people here understand the culture and speak the language. 40% of our employees are veterans themselves. The leadership here at VA headquarters, we all have extensive military experience, which means when we walk in, we understand what veterans experience because we've experienced it in our lives, not only ourselves, but also with our families.
And it's really hard to just sort of manufacture or simulate that camaraderie between veterans. When you feel that, when you're in a room with them, it really is a unique kind of connection I think many of them still crave.
Also add that in addition to those approval numbers, this place in the last 2 years has gone from 17 out of 17 in terms of best places to work, according to the Nonpartisan Partnership for Public Service, to number 6. That is an incredible change when it comes to morale. And the statistic that I like to use is that during this time of epidemic, we actually have fewer requests for leave. We have fewer absences than we did this time last year when there was no epidemic. So our employees are staying on post and they're doing their duty, and they put themselves in harm's way. And this is probably the best story in government.
So you're making the case that it can be done and that government can do its job well in the right circumstances. I want to ask you what we can learn from that, because you've said in other previous interviews that wait times, especially for specialists, are even better at the VA than they are in many cases for the private sector. I think you used Orlando as an example there. But are there any broader policy lessons that we as a country can learn from that example? Because in the broader political context, there are politicians in Congress right now who say, well, we don't want the government to run health care. That's a bureaucratic system. It's a tangled weave. It's a mess. It's not always customer friendly. And yet, here you are making the case that, in fact, it can happen and it can be done well, maybe because you don't have the overhead of having to pay shareholders for profit, or the overhead of administrative burden that some corporations or some insurance companies might add into that equation. So what is it that the VA does well that the country might learn from as we all reimagine the future of American healthcare as a whole?
Well, you have to remember that we are a unique family. This is an earned benefit for a particular part of the American population. And it is an agency that is populated by people who come from that world. What I would say that is different about us is the focus on customer service. When a veteran walks in, that veteran knows that there's somebody on the other side who appreciates what he or she has gone through, because they probably lived it as well. But it's not rocket science. It is a personal approach to medicine that I don't think can be quantified in just bare statistics or policy programs. And that's really what has changed here. And that is our focus on customer service, first internally, to make sure that we are communicating with each other, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to serve the veterans that are part of your world. But that is why we are different. And it's not something that can be readily shared or replicated, I think, in any other setting, because of the unique nature of our family and the unique nature of what the country owes to these people.
Of the VA, Robert Wilkie, a pleasure. Thank you for joining us here on Capitol Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're back in just a moment.
When you want to work in your garden or just be outside, check in with WCIA3's weather team for their 7-day forecast. Sponsored by Edelman. When you need to know what the weather will be today, tomorrow, or this week, you can count on Chief Meteorologist Kevin Whitey, Adam Claybon, Jack Gervin, and Amelia Henderson to give you the most accurate forecast. They'll help you plan your week with a 7-day forecast from WCIA3, your local weather leader. Sponsored by Edelman Electric, Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling.
More than 1,000 people die each year on Illinois roads, and nearly all of these crashes are preventable. Please drive responsibly. It really is a matter of life or death.
IDOT is a proud sponsor of Destination Illinois, Thursdays on WCIA3 News at 6.
Did you know that only 15% of the collision repair shops achieve ICAR Gold status? The highest level of training recognized in the industry. Tapman's Collisions is proud to be one of those shops. I'm happy to tell you our technicians know the latest repair techniques, how to find hidden damage, and repair your car's critical safety features so they work properly. We invest in training because we never cut corners when your family's safety is at stake. Visit Tapman's Car Store, where your safety is our top priority.
Reporting the news is a passion of mine. It's a passion for people and telling the stories that impact their lives. I'm committed to our community and proud to be part of the legacy at WCIA3. Trust us to bring you your most reliable information. WCIA3, your local news leader.
That does it for us this week. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be right back here at the same time next week when Treasurer Michael Frerichs explains whether or not he thinks the state might tax retirement income if voters approve a progressive income tax. For Capitol Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell.